Keith Ellison of Minnesota isn't some obscure C-list Democrat. He is deputy chair of the Democratic National Committee. He nearly won the chairmanship outright last year. He's a champion still of the party's progressive wing. He's a great favorite of the grassroots. He deserves to be regarded as one of the Democratic Party's top thought leaders, such as they are. Yesterday, Ellison tweeted this, quote, "At Moon Palace Books, and I just found the book that will strike fear in the heart of Donald Trump." And the book Ellison was talking about is called Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook. Why would that book strike fear into the heart of the President of the United States? Well, maybe because that book advocates for political violence against people like Donald Trump and his supporters. The author is a man named Mark Bray, and he writes that violence is, quote, "a small though vital sliver of anti-fascist activity." Elsewhere in the text, he approvingly quotes an Antifa activist who says this of his political opponents, quote, "You fight them with fists so you don't have to fight them with knives. You fight them with knives so you don't have to fight them with guns. You fight them with guns so you don't have to fight them with tanks." Well, it's about as explicit a justification for political violence as there is. Bray also in the book, by the way, attacks freedom of speech. He endorses the tactic of silencing those he disagrees with. Now, of course, Bray claims to fight fascism, but he is himself a fascist. Keith Ellison believes Bray's work is admirable. He said so. Now, if you're shocked by this, you haven't followed Ellison's career for very long. He has a long history of saying repugnant things and backing extremist causes. Back in 1989, Ellison wrote that the Constitution existed only for white people. He referred to it as, quote, "their Constitution," calling it, quote, "the best evidence of a white racist conspiracy to subjugate other peoples." That's the Constitution of the United States. Ellison has spoken favorably, meanwhile, of cop killer Assata Shakur. He said he was, quote, "praying that Fidel Castro's communist regime in Cuba would not be forced to extradite her back to the United States." As a law student at the University of Minnesota, Ellison wrote a column calling for the creation of a separate black ethno-state. This is the man who is now second in command of the entire Democratic Party. Now, that ought to bother Republicans and independents. It should terrify Democrats. Most voters don't support cop killing, racial separatism, political violence, abolishing freedom of speech, and they tend to flee from politicians and parties that do support those things. Democrats at this point assume they're going to make major gains in this year's midterm elections purely on the strength of the president's low poll numbers. So at this point, they're happy to ignore haters like Keith Ellison. Ellison opposes Trump, and that's enough for now. But what would happen if Democrats actually did win and got power back in November? Suddenly, Ellison's views would matter a lot. He and people like him would have real control over your life. Are you ready for that?